It was a Tuesday evening in Seattle, the kind of wet gray night where the streetlights looked like halos through the rain. My phone buzzed on the dashboard, just as I merged onto the highway, the caller ID flashing Mom. I hit speaker and kept one hand on the wheel, expecting the usual some reminder about Rachel's latest family update. Instead, her voice came through sharp and rehearsed. "Emily, your father and I have decided you're banned from Thanksgiving this year." The words landed like cold water, soaking straight through my chest. I gripped the steering wheel tighter. "What I managed. Until you apologize to your sister," she continued. "Rachel's been hurt enough." Then faintly in the background I heard my sister's laughter, light, mocking, too familiar. My father's low voice followed, calm but cruel. "If she's so proud, let her eat in the garage." The sound of them laughing together filled the car louder than the rain. That was the moment something inside me cracked, not loud but deep, like ice under pressure. I didn't hang up right away. I listened to the laughter fade into the rustle of someone moving the phone. "Emily," my mom said. "Do you understand?" My voice came out flat. "Yeah, I understand." I ended the call. The silence that followed wasn't empty, it was deafening. The rain drummed against the windshield, and every drop seemed to echo the words "banned from Thanksgiving." Not "we need to talk," not "we're disappointed," just "banned." Like I was some public disgrace instead of their daughter. Traffic slowed to a crawl, red brake lights stretching out like a wound across the highway. I could see my reflection faintly in the windshield. My jaw clenched, eyes hollow. I'd been the family's steady one, the one who fixed problems quietly, who never made a scene. I thought that made me strong. Now it just made me disposable. I'd held them together for years, but it took one argument with Rachel for them to cast me out without hesitation. I pulled off at the next exit and parked under a flickering streetlight. The wipers squeaked across the glass, and I stared at the raindrops sliding down in crooked paths. It wasn't just the ban that stung, it was the way they laughed about it. Rachel had always been the golden one, dramatic and adored, and I'd always been the background character, the technician, the fixer. Every family story revolved around her. Every disaster I quietly repaired. When she crashed her car at 22, I paid her deductible. When her dream business drained Mom and Dad's savings, I rebuilt their accounting system and helped them keep the lights on. When Dad's company teetered on bankruptcy, I wrote the code that saved his biggest contract. They called me the responsible one, with that half-grateful, half-patronizing tone people use when they forget how much you've sacrificed. And now, after all of that, I was the problem. I pressed my forehead to the steering wheel, the smell of rain and metal thick around me. Rachel's voice replayed in my head. "If she's so proud, let her eat in the garage." The cruelty of it wasn't new. It was just louder this time. Public final. Outside, a city bus splashed past, spraying water over the curb. The world kept moving while I sat still, frozen between disbelief and a calm, growing rage. My phone buzzed again, Mom, of course. I didn't answer. I watched the screen light up, fade, then light again. Message after message blinked across the glass. "You need to think about what's best for the family." Rachel didn't mean it like that. "We just want peace." Every text sounded like a command, not a conversation. I leaned back and closed my eyes. My life had been a long list of keeping the peace. When Mom cried about bills, I paid them. When Dad shouted at Rachel, I calmed him down. When Rachel played the victim, I apologized for her. Peace wasn't peace, it was silence. My silence. And tonight, that silence finally ended. The rain softened to a drizzle. My phone buzzed one last time with a voicemail notification. I didn't listen. Instead, I started the car again, pulling onto the nearly empty road. Headlights smeared across wet asphalt. My apartment was 30 minutes away, but it felt like another world. The hum of the tires drowned out everything else, and I let my mind wander to the last Thanksgiving I'd spent with them the year before. I'd been up at 6 a.m., basting the turkey, while Rachel supervised from her phone, scrolling social media and complaining about the smell of onions. Mom had fussed about her table settings. Dad had lectured me about my quiet attitude. When dinner finally started, everyone praised Rachel for the wonderful meal, though she hadn't lifted a finger. I'd smiled, swallowed my irritation, and kept refilling their glasses. That was the pattern they took, I gave, and everyone called it family. Now, as the city lights blurred through the rain, I realized I was done being the quiet one. I wasn't the background anymore. They could keep their laughter, their golden child, their perfect family dinners. I had something they didn't control. I knew every password, every billing cycle, every digital thread that kept their lives comfortable. The company my father owned, the one Rachel paraded as her legacy, ran on the systems I'd built. I slowed at a red light, watching drops slide down the glass like tiny rivers. I could almost hear Dad's voice. "Don't overthink, Emily. Family always comes first." I whispered to the empty car, "Not anymore." The words felt strange on my tongue but freeing. When I reached my building, I parked and sat for a while, engine running, rain ticking gently on the hood. I looked up at the high-rise windows glowing warm in the night, strangers eating together, laughing, existing without judgment. My phone was still buzzing, occasionally more messages, more guilt, more manipulation. I turned it face down. Inside, the elevator ride felt eternal. The mirrored walls reflected a version of me I barely recognized, hair-damp eyes, steady mouth set. In my apartment, I dropped my keys on the counter and towed off my shoes. The room was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I owed anyone a word. I poured a glass of water and leaned against the counter. The silence was heavy but honest. I thought about Mom's voice, Dad's calm agreement, Rachel's cruel laugh, and the phrase that kept repeating, "Eat in the garage." They had no idea what they'd just done. For years, I had kept them afloat. I'd been their invisible engineer, the one who made everything work while they took the credit. And now they'd given me something I hadn't had before: distance. Space to breathe. Space to act. I walked over to my desk and opened my laptop. The screen glowed pale blue, and a familiar dashboard filled with lines of data and network access logs came up. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I didn't type anything yet, but the idea was already alive, pulsing behind my ribs. They thought they could humiliate me, erase me from the table, pretend I didn't matter. A slow smile crept across my face. "Let's see how they handle the dark," I whispered. The rain outside grew softer, almost like applause. That was the moment the silence stopped feeling like defeat. It felt like power. That night, long after the rain stopped, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, knowing that when morning came, nothing between us would ever go back to the way it was. The next morning, Seattle looked washed clean. The streets still glistened from the night's rain, the sky a dull gray blanket pressing down on the city. I sat behind the wheel again, crawling through morning traffic, the rhythm of the windshield wipers hypnotic. It should have been a normal Wednesday, coffee commute code, but nothing felt normal anymore. My mother's voice from the night before still echoed in my head like a bad song I couldn't turn off. "You're banned from Thanksgiving." I had gone to bed late, phone buzzing nonstop, and woken up to 3 new messages from Rachel. The last one read, "Grow up, Emily. You always take things too seriously." I stared at it until the words blurred, then deleted the thread entirely. I wasn't taking it too seriously. They just never took me seriously at all. At the next stoplight, I reached for the travel mug sitting in the cup holder. The coffee had gone cold, bitter, metallic. I took a sip anyway. It grounded me somehow. Rain streaked down the side windows as I drove past the office towers. I was supposed to go straight to the Carter Home Systems headquarters in Tacoma, but instead I kept driving past the exit. My hands stayed on the wheel, but my mind was somewhere far away in the past, in all the quiet places where I'd learned to swallow my pride. Rachel and I had grown up in the same house, but completely different worlds. She was 2 years older, loud, confident, always performing. I was the quiet one, the steady one, Dad used to say like it was a compliment. When Rachel threw tantrums, they bought her things. When I cried, they told me not to be dramatic. Even as kids, she could twist any story in her favor. If she broke a vase, I got scolded for not watching her. If I got an A in math, Mom would smile politely and say, "Don't gloat, sweetie. Rachel's trying her best." Somewhere along the way, I stopped trying to be seen at all. When I was 12, I learned the art of silence. It kept the peace. It kept me safe. But silence, I've come to realize, doesn't protect you. It trains people to ignore you. By the time I reached the bridge out of the city, the rain had picked up again. My phone pinged with work notifications emails from the Carter Systems backend. The subject lines were mundane. Update firmware 2.9.3. Renew vendor credentials. The company was everything to my father, and to Rachel it was an ego trip disguised as a career. To me it was just the structure I had built with my bare hands and long nights. I'd spent years making sure the systems ran smoothly. Without my oversight, half their infrastructure would have crashed years ago. I remembered when it all started 5 years back when Dad decided to launch Carter Home Systems from his garage after leaving his corporate job. He had a vision, but no idea how to make it real. Rachel was in marketing, all charm and sparkle. She convinced investors that the company was a family-built success story. What she didn't say was that the family she spoke of was just me coding from my apartment until midnight to fix her mess. When the company hit its first real crisis, our prototype failed during a product demo, Rachel cried in front of everyone and blamed the software. I spent 72 hours fixing it, no sleep, barely eating. When the client signed the deal afterward, Dad clapped Rachel on the shoulder and said, "You always pull us through." She winked at me across the room like we were in on a joke together. But I wasn't laughing. That was the pattern. She made noise, I made solutions. She got applause, I got exhaustion. And I told myself that was okay. Because that's what family does, right? The traffic cleared as I reached the industrial outskirts of Tacoma. I turned into a quiet neighborhood and parked by the waterfront. The sound of the waves slapping against the dock filled the air. I rolled down the window, breathing in the salt. For a moment, I felt like I could almost forgive them if only they hadn't laughed. The laughter had turned everything to ash. I thought back to my father's voice, low and calm on the phone. "If she's so proud, let her eat in the garage." It wasn't just cruel, it was deliberate. He'd chosen a side, and it wasn't mine. He always chose Rachel's side. I remembered a dinner years ago when Rachel had been late to a client meeting, costing us a deal. She cried, and Mom had said, "She's under pressure, Emily. Don't make her feel worse." When I asked if anyone wanted to know why I stayed up all night to fix her presentation, Dad had frowned. "Don't start, Emily. You know your sister's not as tough as you are." That line had followed me for years, "not as tough as you are." It sounded like praise, but it was just permission for them to keep breaking me. The wind whipped through the car window, carrying the smell of rain and seaweed. I pulled my jacket tighter around me. The truth was, I wasn't tough. I was tired. Tired of pretending, tired of proving, tired of being the family's unacknowledged safety net. When I finally drove to the office, it was past noon. The glass building of Carter Home Systems loomed over the parking lot like a mirror I didn't want to look into. I swiped my keycard at the entrance, and the security guard nodded. "Morning, Emily. Late one, huh?" "Something like that," I said. Inside, the open workspace buzzed with chatter. Rachel's laugh floated over the cubicles. She was standing near the conference room, telling some story to a group of interns, her hands animated, her hair perfectly styled. I walked past without slowing down. At my desk, the computer hummed to life. I opened the admin dashboard, my eyes scanning through rows of active accounts, billing links, maintenance schedules. Every password, every key system ran through me. Dad trusted me to keep things simple. Translation: do everything stay invisible. I typed out a few commands just to feel the pulse of the system. The company was healthy because I'd made it so. But it was built on lies and dependency, just like our family. Rachel appeared at my desk 20 minutes later, coffee cup in hand, smile sharp as a blade. "Hey, you got a minute?" I looked up slowly. "Sure." She leaned on the divider. "So I heard about the call last night. Mom's upset. You really hurt her feelings." I almost laughed. "She banned me from Thanksgiving, Rachel." Rachel shrugged. "Well, maybe you should just say sorry and get over it. You know how Mom is." "Yeah," I said quietly. "I do." She gave a small laugh like she was the sane one in the conversation. "Don't make this into a big thing. Dad's got enough on his plate with the investor meeting next week. We don't need drama right now." I stared at her, the weight of all the years pressing down at once. "You know what's funny, Rachel? You call it drama when I finally stop cleaning up your messes." Her smile faltered. "Excuse me." "You heard me." She straightened, her expression hardening. "I don't know what your problem is, but you need to fix your attitude before you ruin everything Dad's worked for." I leaned back in my chair, calm. "I think Dad's going to be fine. He always lands on his feet." "Right," Rachel blinked, confused by my tone, but I didn't explain. She turned on her heel and walked away, muttering something about me being impossible. I watched her disappear into her office, the glass door closing behind her. My reflection stared back at me, eyes cold but steady. By the end of the day, the sky outside had turned violet. I packed my laptop into my bag, the hum of the servers faint in the background. My phone buzzed again. "Mom, this time just one message. We love you, Emily. Don't be difficult." I read it twice, then turned the phone face down on my desk. The irony almost made me smile. They only said they loved me when I was doing what they wanted. On the drive home, the city lights blurred into streaks of gold and red. I turned the radio off and let the silence fill the car. Somewhere between Tacoma and Seattle, it hit me this wasn't just about Thanksgiving. It was about the pattern, the endless invisible labor that kept everyone comfortable while I starved for respect. I'd spent years fixing systems that didn't deserve to survive. Maybe it was time to let one of them crash. As I pulled into my apartment building, the rain started again, gentle and steady. I sat in the car for a moment, watching the drops collect on the windshield. The streetlights shimmered in each bead of water, tiny sparks against the dark. I whispered to myself, I've been maintaining their system for years. Maybe it's time I run a test. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel powerless. I felt ready. That night, as I stared at the rain streaking down my window, I knew something had shifted. Whatever came next wouldn't be about keeping peace anymore, but about taking back control. By the time Thursday rolled around, I had stopped checking my phone altogether. The unanswered messages sat there like ghosts, Mom's guilt-laced pleas, Rachel's sarcastic one-liners, Dad's brief diplomatic sentences pretending nothing was wrong. I couldn't bring myself to delete them, not yet. I wasn't ready to let go of the proof. When I arrived at Carter Home Systems that morning, the office buzzed with the usual shallow enthusiasm. People in branded hoodies clutched coffee cups, laughing too loud, trying to impress someone. The air smelled like burnt espresso and anxiety. I dropped my bag on my desk and powered up my computer. My inbox blinked with a dozen new tasks, half of them forwarded by Rachel, each one tagged urgent. I almost laughed. She didn't know how to do half of what she was demanding. At 9:30 sharp, Dad called an all-hands meeting. Conference room A in 5 minutes, he said, his tone clipped. Rachel was already in there when I walked in, standing by the presentation screen like she owned the place. Her white blazer gleamed under the fluorescent lights. She smiled when she saw me, the kind of smile people use before they stab you with a compliment. "Morning, Emily," she chirped. "I hope you've got the update ready for the client portal. We're presenting new integrations today." "It's ready," I said, "like it always is." Her eyes flickered, then darted away. Dad cleared his throat. "Let's begin." He started the meeting with his usual speech about growth and family values, words that made me want to laugh out loud. Every time he said family, I thought of the phone call, Rachel's laughter, Mom's silence, my name being erased. When the presentation ended, Dad praised Rachel for her excellent coordination. Rachel tilted her head modestly. Teamwork makes the dream work, she said sweetly. I almost rolled my eyes. As we filed out, Rachel caught up to me in the hallway. Hey, she said, lowering her voice. Can we talk? About what? She smiled tightly. You know the tension. Between you and Mom. It's making everyone uncomfortable. I bet it's making you uncomfortable, I said, not bothering to hide my tone. Come on, she said, stepping closer. You're blowing this out of proportion. Mom's just trying to keep the peace. You know how sensitive she gets around the holidays. I stopped walking. Sensitive Rachel, she banned me from Thanksgiving. Rachel's lips twitched. You did kind of start the argument. I started it. You accused me of sabotaging your marketing proposal because you didn't understand basic analytics. Rachel's jaw tightened. You're always so defensive. And you're always wrong, I said quietly, and kept walking. She muttered something under her breath that I didn't catch, but I didn't care. The old me would have tried to smooth it over to avoid being the difficult one. Not this time. I spent the rest of the morning buried in work, but my thoughts wouldn't settle. Every keystroke felt heavy. I was tired of fixing things Code People, the family brand. Around lunchtime, a message popped up from Jordan, one of the accountants. Hey, Emily, you got a sec? I met him by the break room. He looked nervous, glancing around before speaking. I probably shouldn't tell you this, he said quietly, but Rachel's been using the corporate card for personal stuff again. Big transactions, spas, online orders, that kind of thing. I didn't even flinch. Of course she has. She labeled them under business client hospitality. I gave a thin smile. Hospitality for herself, probably. Jordan Sahil. I'm flagging it for review, but she's still got admin approval. Thought you should know. I nodded. Thanks, Jordan. I'll take care of it. When he left, I leaned against the counter, staring at the vending machine. My reflection in the glass looked calm, but my pulse was racing. Rachel's misuse of company funds wasn't new, but now it wasn't just irresponsible. It was leverage. By the time I got back to my desk, the idea had started forming sharp and precise. For years, I'd been the one to build their systems to hold everything together. I knew every financial link, every billing cycle, every password. Rachel might have been the face of the company, but I was its bloodstream. And if I wanted to, I could stop the pulse. At 5, just as I was packing up, Dad appeared at my desk. Dinner tonight, he said. Your mom insists. I hesitated. You sure that's a good idea? He gave me the practiced smile that used to calm me when I was little. You girls need to put this behind you. I wanted to say I'm not the one who started it, but what was the point? Fine, I said. Their house looked the same as always when I pulled into the driveway, immaculate garden porch light on like a picture in a real estate ad. Through the window, I could see silhouettes moving in the kitchen. My stomach twisted. Inside, the air smelled of rosemary and butter. Mom looked up from the stove and tried to smile. Emily, sweetheart, thank you for coming. Sure, I said, hanging my coat. Rachel sat at the dining table, swirling wine in her glass. Nice of you to show up. Don't start, Mom said quickly. We're not doing that tonight. Dinner began with small talk, Dad talking about new investors, Mom about church bake sales, Rachel pretending to be the perfect daughter. I just listened. It felt surreal, like I was sitting in a play where everyone forgot their lines. Halfway through the meal, Rachel sighed dramatically. So, Emily, are you planning to apologize before Thanksgiving, or after the fork slipped from my hand and clattered against the plate? The room went still. Dad frowned. Rachel, what? She said innocently. We can't pretend this isn't awkward. Emily knows what she did. I looked at her, then at my parents. What exactly did I do? Rachel leaned back. You undermined me at work. You embarrassed me in front of Dad's investors. I corrected your numbers so we wouldn't look incompetent. Her cheeks flushed. You always have to make me look bad. I laughed low and bitter. I don't have to try, Rachel. Mom's voice sharpened. Emily, that's enough. No, I said, quietly setting my napkin down. It's not. For a moment, no one moved. Then I stood, pushing the chair back. You know what? Enjoy your dinner. Enjoy Thanksgiving too. Emily, Dad started, but I was already walking toward the door. Rachel called after me, her voice full of venom. You've always been jealous of me. You can't stand that I'm the one Dad trusts. I stopped at the doorway and turned back. You're right, I said, my voice calm. Dad trusts you with everything. Let's see how long that lasts. Then I walked out. The night air hit me like a slap. I stood on the porch, breathing hard, the cold biting through my coat. Inside, I could hear them arguing, Mom's high-pitched voice, Dad's deep murmur, Rachel's defiant tone. I didn't feel sad anymore, just detached. Like I was finally watching the show from the audience, instead of being trapped on the stage. I walked to my car and sat there for a long time, staring at the dark windows of the house. The porch light flickered, casting uneven shadows across the driveway. The phrase Rachel had thrown at me, the one Dad trusts, kept replaying in my mind. She was right in a way. He did trust me. He trusted me to keep the systems running, the accounts balanced, the chaos contained. He trusted me to be silent. But silence wasn't my job anymore. I started the car, headlights slicing through the mist. The dashboard clock glowed faintly. My fingers rested on the steering wheel, steady now. They thought they could humiliate me and still expect me to fix their world. They were wrong. When I got home, I kicked off my shoes, dropped my purse on the couch, and walked straight to my desk. The laptop weighted, the screen black but ready. I pressed the power button. The light flared to life, washing the room in blue. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. The system's dashboard blinked open, network access, admin control, financial databases. All of it. Every account that made their lives function. They thought I would always play in Rachel's shadow. They thought I'd keep patching their leaks forever. I smiled faintly as the screen reflected in my eyes. Let's run a little diagnostic, I whispered. And this time I meant it. That night, long after I shut my laptop, I lay awake replaying every word from that dinner, realizing the anger wasn't fading this time, it was organizing itself into a plan. The next few days passed in a strange quiet. No calls, no texts, not even a passive-aggressive email from Rachel. It was as if my family had gone on a collective strike, deciding to erase me by ignoring me completely. I should have felt hurt, but instead I felt something close to relief. Their silence was cleaner than their noise. At work, things looked normal on the surface. People moved through the halls with their coffees and laptops, chatting about weekend plans, unaware that the family running this company was slowly imploding. I spent most of my time in my office door, half closed, pretending to focus on code. But my mind wasn't on the numbers or algorithms. It was on the years behind me, the quiet sacrifices I had made that built everything around me. It started small, back when Carter Home Systems was just a dream in my father's head. He'd said, we'll build something that keeps families safe. I'd believed him. I wrote the first software that controlled lighting systems, alarms, locks. I tested every prototype, stayed up all night debugging when nothing worked. Rachel called it Dad's genius, and I didn't correct her. I thought family pride mattered more than personal credit. When the company started making money, Mom would beam about how proud she was of our little family business. What she meant was Dad and Rachel. My name didn't come up in investor dinners or interviews. I was the invisible one behind the curtain, the reason things worked, but never the face of anything. When bills piled up in those first few years, I was the one who pulled from my savings. Dad promised to pay me back, but he never did. We'll make it up to you once we're stable, he said. Stability came and went, but the payback never did. I didn't remind him. I told myself that's what daughters do. Then, there was the time Mom's surgery wasn't fully covered by insurance. She cried, saying they'd have to delay it. Without telling her, I transferred the money. She thanked me afterward, but by Christmas she was bragging about how Robert handled it. I didn't correct her then either. What would be the point? Over time, giving became habit. I covered gaps in payroll when clients were late. I handled Rachel's credit card bills when she forgot to make payments. I fixed systems she'd promised investors were already done. Each favor felt small in the moment, but stacked together they were enormous. I'd been holding this family up for years, one quiet payment, one compromise at a time. Sometimes late at night, I would look through old statements, transfers, invoices, receipts, and realize how much of myself I had poured into keeping their lives from collapsing. I had bought their peace of mind, and in return, they had given me invisibility. At work that Wednesday, the accountant Jordan came by again, dropping a stack of reports on my desk. I found more questionable charges on Rachel's card, he said. Personal or business, he hesitated. Personal. She's been using the corporate account for home furniture jewelry spa subscriptions. It's thousands of dollars. Of course it is, I murmured. Do you want me to flag them? I shook my head. No, not yet. He frowned, clearly confused, but didn't push. Okay, just thought you should know. After he left, I stared at the data on the screen. Each transaction was a small betrayal, a reminder of how deep the dependency ran. They all leaned on me financially, emotionally, even technically, and none of them even saw it. It wasn't family, it was extraction. Around noon, Dad stopped by my office. He looked tired, the lines on his face deeper than usual. Lunch, he asked. I almost said no, but something in his voice sounded softer than usual, like an olive branch. Sure, I said. We sat at the small cafe across the street. The conversation was awkward, filled with long silences and polite half-smiles. He stirred his coffee for too long before finally speaking. Your mother's worried about the tension. You and Rachel need to fix this. She banned me from Thanksgiving, Dad, he sighed. She overreacted. She feels embarrassed. You know how she is. Yeah, I said, leaning back. I do. He didn't look up. You're stronger than she is, Emily. Be the bigger person. There it was again, the lifelong command disguised as a compliment. Be the bigger person. Be the one who fixes things. I felt the familiar wave of exhaustion rise inside me. Do you know what that really means, Dad? I asked quietly. When you say I'm stronger, it means you expect me to carry the damage she causes. That's not strength. That's endurance. He blinked, surprised. That's not what I meant. I think it is, I said softly. He looked down, then changed the subject to safe territory numbers, clients' projections. I nodded where necessary, but I was done listening. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat at my desk again, laptop, opened the blue glow painting my apartment walls. I opened the Carter Systems admin dashboard and stared at it for a long time. I had never used my access for anything beyond maintenance, but now I saw it differently. The data wasn't just code, it was power. Every account, every link, every autopay connection that kept their comfortable lives running was tethered to me. My cursor hovered over the section labeled Financial Integrations. It listed everything: utilities, supplier payments, payroll, even the private accounts for Mom and Dad that I had set up years ago to simplify their bills. I'd tied everything together to make their lives easier. Without me, it would all come undone. A memory flashed: Mom's voice on the phone last week, telling me to grow up and apologize like a good daughter. Rachel laughing in the background, saying I could eat in the garage. My throat tightened, but my hands felt steady. I didn't make any changes that night. Not yet. But I started taking notes: each account, each access point, every password that linked to their comfort. It wasn't about revenge, not exactly. It was about truth. For once, I wanted them to see what I'd really done, what I'd built, what they'd taken for granted. The next morning, I woke up early. The air in the apartment was cold, crisp. I poured myself a cup of coffee and opened my notebook. Page after page of handwritten details stared back at me. The sheer volume of it shocked even me. I had created a map of their entire dependency, and for the first time I understood just how entangled we were. It wasn't just emotional, it was structural. I was the infrastructure of their world. Later that afternoon, while Rachel was in a meeting, I walked quietly into the server room. The hum of machines filled the space like a heartbeat. I checked the system logs, making sure everything was backed up to my personal cloud. A habit, I told myself, but deep down I knew it was preparation. As I stood there, surrounded by blinking lights, I remembered something my mentor Linda Graves had told me years ago when I first started in tech. Whoever controls the system controls the story. At the time, I thought she meant data security. Now I understood she'd meant life. That night, I sat on the floor of my apartment, surrounded by printed statements, old bills, highlighted transfers. The pages formed little piles around me: Mom, Dad, Rachel, Company. Each pile was a record of what I had carried alone. I picked up one receipt, a $5,000 transfer from 2 years ago. Dad's surgery deductible. I remembered that call too, Mom crying, Rachel, promising to ask around, and me quietly moving the money before the tears dried. No one ever mentioned it again. I laid the receipt back on the floor and said it out loud for the first time. This is what I did for you. The words felt heavy, final. I gathered the papers, stacked them neatly, and placed them in a binder I found at the bottom of my bookshelf. On the spine I wrote in black marker, the Carter Ledger. It wasn't a weapon, not yet. It was proof. Proof of everything they had ignored. When I finished, I sat back staring at the binder in the dim light. For years, my silence had kept them comfortable. But silence had another side. It could also keep me safe. I turned off the lamp, letting the room fall into darkness. The hum of the refrigerator was the only sound left. I whispered into the dark, let's see what happens when the system finally notices who's been running it. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel small. I felt inevitable. By the weekend, the binder sat finished on my desk, every page, a record of what I'd carried for them, and as I stared at it under the dim lamplight, I knew the next move wouldn't be quiet anymore. Sunday morning arrived with a cold drizzle and a heavy sky that made the whole city look washed out. I sat by the window with a mug of coffee, trying to convince myself that this was just another quiet weekend. But the truth was, the silence had started to hum, like the low vibration of an oncoming storm. I scrolled through emails, avoiding the ones from my father marked important. Then, without warning, a new notification popped up on my phone. Family group chat, Thanksgiving 2024 prep. The title alone made my stomach tighten. I hadn't looked at that chat in weeks. Curiosity, or maybe masochism, made me tap it open. The messages flooded in one after another. My mother had sent the first. Here's the guest list so everyone knows what to bring. Below her text was a neat list of names: Dad, Mom, Rachel and Andrew, Aunt May and Uncle Ron, Cousin Kelly. Even 2 of Rachel's friends from work. My eyes skimmed down, scanning for my name. It wasn't there. For a second I thought maybe she'd just forgotten. Maybe she assumed I'd come, or maybe she'd add me later. But before I could even finish the thought, Rachel chimed in, keeping it small this year. Cozy family only. I stared at that message until the words blurred. Family only. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I typed, looks like fun. Should I bring dessert, like last year? The response came within seconds. Mom, sweetheart, let's just let things settle first, okay? You know how Rachel feels. Rachel followed with a text that cut straight through me. Maybe next year. We're keeping things drama-free. Then came a string of laughing emojis from Aunt May. Someone sent a gif of a dancing turkey. It was meant to be light-hearted, playful, but in that moment I could feel the humiliation bloom like heat in my chest. They weren't ignoring me. They were excluding me deliberately, and they were doing it publicly. I put the phone down, staring out at the rain, slick streets. My reflection in the window looked small and pale. This wasn't new. Being left out had been the story of my life with them, but it was the first time they'd made it official. I told myself not to care. I even tried to laugh about it. But as the minutes passed, messages kept coming, recipes, side dishes, jokes about how this year will finally be peaceful. I could feel the weight of every word pressing down on me. When I couldn't take it anymore, I typed another message, my hands shaking slightly. I didn't realize peace meant pretending I don't exist. The chat went dead for almost a full minute. Then Rachel replied, "Oh, don't be dramatic, Em. You know Mom just wants a quiet holiday." I could almost hear her voice, that lazy condescension that made me want to throw my phone across the room. Instead, I wrote, "Got it. Enjoy your quiet." Then I muted the chat. For a long time, I sat there in silence. My heart beat loud in my ears. It wasn't just the exclusion, it was the way they found it funny. The casual cruelty. Like my pain was entertainment. By noon, I needed to move. I grabbed my coat and left the apartment, walking aimlessly through the damp streets. Seattle in November had that familiar, chill, wet air, bare trees, the faint smell of coffee from every corner cafe. I ducked into one of them, ordered another cup, and sat by the window. The place was warm, filled with chatter. People around me were talking about travel plans, family reunions, sales recipes. Normal lives. I tried to lose myself in the noise, but my phone buzzed again. Against my better judgment, I looked. A new message in the group chat. "Rachel, again. If Emily wants turkey, there's always leftovers in the garage fridge." 3 people reacted with laughing emojis. Something inside me went still. Completely still. I set the phone down slowly, my pulse no longer racing but steady, deliberate. The humiliation didn't feel hot anymore, it felt cold like metal, the kind of cold that clears the mind. I stayed in that cafe for hours, barely tasting my coffee. I thought about every Thanksgiving before this one, how I'd always been the one cooking, cleaning, bringing extra food because Mom forgot ingredients. I thought about how they used to joke that I worked too much, saved too much, took life too seriously. And now I was the joke itself. As the sky darkened, I walked back to my car, the drizzle turning to steady rain. I sat there in the driver's seat, watching the wipers move back and forth. My phone kept lighting up, but I didn't look again. I didn't need to. I'd already seen everything I needed to see. When I got home, the first thing I did was open my laptop. The company dashboard glowed in the dim light of my apartment. Numbers, accounts, systems, all the things I kept alive every day. I clicked through the tabs one by one, my mind strangely quiet. That's when an email from the bank appeared. Quarterly payroll authorization pending. The same routine email I got every 3 months. But this time the timing made me laugh out loud. I whispered to myself, "Looks like I'm still the one keeping the lights on." I clicked it open and stared at the pending transactions. My fingers hovered over the approve button, then stopped. For the first time in years, I didn't hit it. I leaned back in my chair, the glow of the monitor washing over me. The hum of the refrigerator filled the silence. "You want me out of the holiday," I said, softly, to no one. "Fine. Let's see what happens when I really disappear." The next morning, the group chat was flooded with cheerful photos, Rachel holding a pie, Mom smiling beside a roasted turkey, everyone laughing like they had just won something. I scrolled through the images without emotion. Then I noticed something odd. Dad had posted a picture of Rachel and captioned it, "My girl's my pride." I stared at that sentence until my eyes burned. I was done crying for them. I closed the app and powered off my phone. Outside, the sky had cleared. A few streaks of sunlight cut through the gray clouds, turning the wet pavement into silver glass. I made myself breakfast, scrambled eggs and toast, and ate it standing by the window. The quiet was no longer oppressive. It was mine. But underneath that calm was something sharper, a pulse of resolve. They'd mocked me in front of everyone, treated me like an outsider in a family I'd built piece by piece with my sacrifices. That was their mistake. They thought the worst thing I could do was stay angry. They had no idea what happened when I stopped caring. I opened my laptop again and went to the file labeled System Overview. My eyes traced every connection, every line that tied their company, their bills, their comfort to me. I wasn't planning destruction. Not yet. What I wanted was balance. I began to make notes. Power grid accounts, shared phone plan, automatic payments linked to my name. All the invisible strings they'd never even noticed. Each one represented a part of me they'd taken for granted. I highlighted them one by one until the screen looked like a network of glowing threads. For the first time, I didn't feel small or overlooked. I felt powerful precisely because they had underestimated me for so long. That night, as I turned off the lights, my phone buzzed once more, a final message from Mom. "We love you, Emily. Don't be stubborn. Just say sorry and we can move on." I stared at the text for a long time, then set the phone face down on the table. "You already did move on," I whispered. "Now it's my turn." The city outside was quiet, the rain finally gone. I lay in bed, my mind steady, the pieces of a plan forming in the dark. They wanted peace. They were about to get it, just not the kind they expected. By the time Thanksgiving week arrived, the plan in my head had stopped being an idea and started feeling like an inevitability, a quiet decision waiting for the right moment to unfold. Thanksgiving morning arrived, wrapped in silence. No calls, no texts, no family noise bleeding through my phone like it always did this time of year. The sky over Seattle was pale gray, the kind that made everything look faded and fragile. I stood in my kitchen with a mug of coffee, staring at the empty countertop where a tray of stuffing usually sat waiting to be delivered to my parents' house. This time there was nothing. For the first time in years, I didn't have anywhere to be. I didn't have a dish to bring or a table to set. I didn't have Rachel's voice ordering me to slice vegetables faster, or my mother hovering reminding me not to forget napkins. The quiet was heavy but clean. I turned on some soft jazz and tried to pretend it was just another Thursday. I wiped down the counters. I reorganized a shelf. I even pulled out an old book I'd been meaning to read. But the silence was like water. It seeped into everything. Every few minutes I'd glance at my phone, even though I knew no one was calling. At 10, I put on my jacket and stepped outside. The air was cold and sharp, the kind that bites the inside of your lungs. The streets were nearly empty, just a few people walking dogs or carrying grocery bags. From somewhere down the block came the faint smell of roasted turkey. My stomach turned. I kept walking, trying to shake the feeling. I walked through the park, past trees stripped bare of leaves, their branches black against the silver sky. Families were gathering under gazebos, setting up folding tables, laughing over flasks of coffee. I tried to smile at a little girl chasing pigeons, but the lump in my throat made it impossible. By noon, I was back in my apartment. I reheated soup I didn't want and ate it standing at the counter. The phone finally buzzed. My heart jumped, stupidly hopeful. But it was just a notification from a delivery app. No messages. At 1:30, it buzzed again. This time I saw her name, Mom. For a split second, warmth bloomed in my chest. Maybe they'd changed their minds. Maybe they wanted to fix it. I opened the text slowly. "We saved you a plate. It's on the porch if you want it." That was it. No invitation. No apology. Just an offer to pick up leftovers like some stranger. I stared at the screen, my hand trembling slightly. A laugh bubbled out of me, sharp and humorless. "A plate on the porch," I said out loud. How thoughtful. The message was short, but the meaning was enormous. They weren't trying to make peace, they were reminding me of my place. On the outside. I sat down at the table, phone still in my hand. Part of me wanted to throw it across the room, part of me wanted to cry. But mostly, I felt numb. This wasn't just exclusion, it was cruelty disguised as kindness. By 3 o'clock, I couldn't stand the stillness anymore. I grabbed my keys and drove. I didn't know where I was going until I realized the road I'd taken led straight to Tacoma. The closer I got, the more the familiar landmarks appeared: gas stations, old shops, the curve of the street that led to my parents' house. I slowed down when I saw their neighborhood. Cars lined the driveway, the street packed with relatives I hadn't spoken to in months. The windows of the house glowed gold against the gray afternoon. I parked across the street and turned off the engine. My breath fogged the glass as I sat there watching. I could see figures moving behind the curtains, hear the faint hum of laughter when the door opened for another guest. Then I saw it, the plate. It sat on the porch by the door, covered in foil, small and lonely. I stared at it for a long time, then noticed a movement beside it. A neighbor's orange cat had wandered up the steps and was sniffing around the foil. It pawed at the edge curiously. Something inside me cracked open. Not anger, Not even sadness, just clarity. The kind that comes when something breaks so cleanly it can't be repaired. I didn't get out of the car. I didn't grab the plate. I just sat there until the cold seeped through my coat and the windshield fogged completely. Then I started the engine again and drove away. The road back to Seattle was empty. I drove with the windows cracked, letting the freezing air sting my cheeks. The tears came quietly this time, not like before. They weren't loud or desperate. They were quiet, steady, inevitable. By the time I reached my building, the sun was gone. The city lights had flickered on, glowing soft against the dark sky. I parked, went upstairs, and walked straight to my desk. My laptop sat open where I'd left it, the binder, the Carter ledger beside it. I ran my hand across the cover before sitting down. I opened the binder and flipped through the pages, transfers, invoices, every quiet rescue I'd made for them. Each one felt like a ghost of a life I used to live. My mother's medical bills, Rachel's debt, the mortgage payment I covered when Dad panicked about foreclosure. Every time they laughed, I had paid for it in silence. Now the silence was mine to keep. I powered on the laptop, the glow spreading across the room. I opened the admin panel for Carter Systems. Rows of data filled the screen: accounts, balances, automated transfers. My pulse slowed as I scrolled. Every system I'd built to keep them comfortable, every safety net they didn't even know they had, sat neatly in front of me. I whispered to the empty room, "You froze me out of Thanksgiving. Let's see how you handle a real freeze." I clicked through the linked utilities first: electricity, water, internet, all tied to my payment credentials. Then came the corporate accounts, software licenses, payroll, maintenance fees, all roads leading back to me. I wasn't going to destroy anything. I was just going to stop holding it up. Before I touched a thing, I paused. My mind replayed every guilt trip, every "you're stronger than your sister," every "be the bigger person." My mother's voice saying family takes care of each other. My own voice so many years ago saying I will. But not anymore. I started with the simplest task: revoking access. One by one, I removed my personal card from their automatic payments. I reassigned ownership of the company accounts back to primary user Robert Carter. It was surgical clean and entirely justified. As each confirmation email pinged into my inbox, the weight on my chest lifted. I wasn't cutting ties, I was just handing them back the ropes they'd wrapped around me. Halfway through, my phone buzzed again. Mom's name. I ignored it. Then Rachel. Then Dad. I let them all ring. I finished the last adjustment and sat back, exhaling slowly. The silence that followed wasn't heavy this time. It was steady grounding. I closed the laptop and turned off the lights. My reflection in the dark window stared back at me, tired, yes, but lighter somehow. I whispered to her, to me, to the version of myself that had always given too much. "This is peace." The phone buzzed again, and I let it vibrate until it stopped. In the distance, the city was alive. People laughing, eating, celebrating, but none of that mattered. I poured myself a glass of wine, lifted it toward the empty room, and said softly, "Happy Thanksgiving." Then I took a sip and smiled. The quiet no longer hurt. It was mine. By the time the sun came up the next morning, the peace I'd felt the night before had hardened into something sharper, a calm so steady it almost felt like purpose. The day after Thanksgiving, the world outside looked washed out, pale sunlight, struggling through a sky the color of dirty glass. My phone was still silent, the unanswered calls from last night sitting in a neat little list on the screen. I hadn't listened to the voicemails. I didn't need to. I knew what they'd say: confusion, guilt, maybe a bit of blame. The same pattern as always. I made coffee and sat by the window watching steam curl from the mug. For once I didn't feel anxious about what was coming. Everything that needed to be done had already been set in motion. I'd spent the last few nights preparing, untangling accounts, gathering proof, saving copies of every transaction and communication that tied me to them. The binder sat open on the table beside me, pages fanned out like wings. The Carter ledger. My quiet masterpiece of truth. At 10, I got dressed and headed to meet Clara. She was waiting at our usual coffee shop near Pike Place Market. Her silver hair tucked neatly into a bun, a sharp navy coat buttoned to her neck. When she saw me, she smiled, but it was the kind of smile that saw right through you. "You look calm," she said as I sat down. "I am. That usually means you've made a decision." I nodded. "I have." She stirred her tea, waiting. Clara had been my mentor years ago, back when I was just starting in tech. She was the one who taught me the value of documentation, of evidence, of keeping receipts, both literal and emotional. "I'm done," I said finally. "I've pulled everything. They don't even realize yet how dependent they are on me. But they're about to find out." Clara didn't react with surprise. She just watched me over the rim of her cup. "And what are you hoping happens after that?" "I don't want revenge," I said, though I wasn't sure if that was entirely true. "I just want out, completely." Clara nodded. "Then you need to do this clean. No half measures. Once you start, you can't go back." "I know." She leaned forward. "Then here's what you do next. You don't just pull the plug, you document it. Every call, every message, every change you make. When they come after you, and they will, you show them the truth. The ledger becomes your shield." Her words settled into me like stones, heavy but grounding. "You've spent years being the safety net," she said softly. "Now it's time to cut the cords. But don't do it out of spite. Do it to set yourself free." When I left the cafe, the wind off the water was sharp and cold. I pulled my scarf tighter, the binder pressed against my side under my coat. Freedom, I thought. It wasn't supposed to feel this lonely. Back home, I spread everything across the kitchen table. Bank statements, corporate emails, payment logs, the physical proof of my silent contributions. I opened my laptop and started creating a master file, one that mapped out every financial tie I had to them. Mortgage autopay, company software subscriptions, utility accounts. Every one of them linked to me. It took hours. By evening, my apartment looked like an operations room. Post-it notes lined the wall, each labeled with a different system: electric, internet, payroll, corporate taxes. It was all there, the web I had built to hold them together. I stood back and stared at it. It looked like a crime scene, except the only crime was devotion. When my phone buzzed, I almost didn't answer. But the caller ID said Dad, and something in me hesitated. I picked up. Emily, his voice was uncertain, tired. "Hi, Dad. I hope you had a nice Thanksgiving." I almost laughed. "You mean the one I wasn't invited to?" he sighed. "Your mother didn't mean to hurt you. She just thought it was best to keep things calm." I saw the photos, Dad. It looked very calm. There was silence on the line. Then quietly, "You didn't come by for the plate." "No," I said. "I left it for the cat." He didn't know what to say to that. For once, the man who always had advice, solutions, speeches, had nothing. I could hear him breathing, the weight of guilt seeping through the line. Finally, he said, "You know, this family, this company, it doesn't work without you." "I know," I said softly. "That's the problem." He hesitated. "What do you mean?" But I didn't explain. "Good night, Dad." I hung up. Afterward, I sat there for a long time staring at the phone. I thought of all the nights I'd worked late to fix payroll so employees got paid on time, of all the bills I'd quietly covered so my parents could sleep peacefully. They'd never once asked how it got done. They'd just assumed it would. That I would. Now I was done assuming responsibility for their comfort. The next morning, I started with the company. I logged into the Carter Systems administrative dashboard, the place where all transactions, licenses, and utilities were managed. My access level was Master Admin. That meant I could do anything. I went through each section carefully. There were over 30 automatic payments linked to my name, everything from software subscriptions to equipment leases. I began transferring ownership of each one back to their individual accounts. For every email confirmation that popped up, I saved a copy in the binder. Evidence. By noon, my phone was buzzing again. Rachel this time. I ignored it. Then another text came through. Did you mess with the system? I can't log into payroll? I didn't answer. Another one followed, then another. Dad says we got a bank alert. What's going on? I set the phone face down on the table and kept working. This wasn't sabotage. It was accountability. By late afternoon, I'd cut off everything that had my name on it. Utilities, corporate cards, system access, all reassigned. My laptop pinged one final confirmation. Autopay deactivation complete. I exhaled slowly, my hands trembling slightly. The silence that followed was thick, waiting. Then my phone rang again. Mom. I didn't answer. The voicemail came through seconds later. Emily, she said, voice trembling. Something's wrong. The internet's down, the electric bill says overdue, your father is furious. Call me back right now. I didn't move. I just sat there listening to her panic, the sound of chaos finally reaching them. A few hours later, I opened my email. Dozens of notifications waited, alerts from the company's system, requests for admin recovery, frantic messages from Rachel. One of them read, "This isn't funny. You're destroying everything Dad built." I typed back a single line, "No, I'm just stopping what I built." Then I deleted the draft instead of sending it. They didn't deserve the explanation. When the sky outside turned dark, I turned off my laptop. The glow vanished, leaving my reflection faint in the screen. For the first time in years, my life wasn't tethered to their stability. My phone vibrated again, 2 missed calls. I smiled faintly. "Let them call," I whispered. "They'll understand soon enough." I poured myself another cup of coffee and walked to the window. Down below, the city sparkled alive and loud. Somewhere out there, my family's world was unraveling, and I didn't feel guilty. I felt calm. The quiet I'd always feared had finally become my armor. By Sunday night, the calls had turned from angry to desperate, and as I watched their names flash across my phone, I knew the real silence, the one that would finally teach them, was about to begin. Monday dawned with a thin fog crawling across the city, muting the light that crept through my blinds. I woke up before my alarm, heart steady, mind clear. It wasn't excitement or guilt, it was control. I made coffee, tied my hair back, and sat down at my desk. The binder lay beside my laptop, a silent witness to everything that had brought me here. Today wasn't about emotion, it was about execution. The first call was to the county office. My voice was calm, professional. "Yes, I'd like to remove my authorization for property tax auto payments on account number 3029. The clerk confirmed the details, then asked the usual question. "Can I ask the reason for cancellation?" I smiled faintly, even though she couldn't see it. "Because it's no longer my responsibility." When she said all set, I hung up, exhaling slowly. One string cut. Next came the company. Carter Home Systems had built its success on a patchwork of systems I'd coded and maintained. Every security key, every billing account, every integration passed through me. It was ironic, Dad used to say, the business was a family operation. Yet the only family member who actually kept it functional was the one they'd banned from Thanksgiving. I logged into the admin portal and began the process. Each page was a familiar landscape: payroll, cloud storage, software licenses, utilities, vendor accounts. I transferred ownership to the primary contact, Dad's name. It took hours. Every time I confirmed a transfer, a sense of quiet finality settled deeper into my bones. Halfway through, I took a break to stretch. My phone was vibrating nonstop on the table. Mom, Rachel, Dad. The same names repeating like an alarm clock I refused to turn off. I muted it. The afternoon light shifted across the wall as I continued. Each action was surgical. Remove my card from the electric company. Cancel the business credit extension I'd co-signed. Disable my admin access from their cloud storage. I saved every confirmation email into a single folder labeled proof. When I reached the family phone plan, I hesitated for a second. That one felt symbolic. 6 years ago, I'd put everyone on a shared plan because Mom kept forgetting to pay the bill. It was supposed to make things easier. Every month since then, the payment came straight out of my account. Hundreds of dollars, invisible and automatic. I clicked transfer ownership. The screen asked for the new account holder's name. I typed Karen Carter. The moment I confirmed it, a text flashed on my screen. Your plan has been updated. Billing will now be directed to the new primary account holder. I leaned back in my chair and whispered, "You're welcome." Outside, a delivery truck rumbled past, breaking the silence. I sipped cold coffee and looked around my apartment. It was small, quiet, but it was mine. For years, I'd felt trapped by obligation, like my worth depended on being useful. But today, every click was a reclamation, a small, precise rebellion. At 4 in the afternoon, I packed my laptop and drove to the phone store downtown. The young clerk behind the counter smiled politely. "What can I help you with?" "I'd like to move my line off a shared family plan," I said. "Of course," he typed quickly, eyes scanning his screen. "So you're transferring the other lines to the current primary account holder?" "Yes," I said, my voice even. "Okay, that means your mom will be responsible for the other 4 lines starting next billing cycle." "That's correct." He turned the screen toward me. "You'll just need to sign here to release them." I signed, my hand steady. When it was done, he handed me a new SIM card. "Your number's yours alone now. Welcome to independence." His casual words landed heavier than he knew. Independence. I smiled. "Thanks." As I walked out, I could already imagine the messages flooding in once they realized what I'd done. The panic, the confusion. For years, I'd been the invisible engine running their comfort. Now the engine was gone. By the time I got home, the storm had begun. The first text came from Rachel. "Why can't I call Mom? My phone says the plan's been changed. Did you mess with it?" Then, "Mom, Emily, did you do something to the account? None of our phones are working properly." I didn't reply. I poured myself a glass of wine and opened the binder. Page after page of evidence stared back at me, every transfer, every favor, every quiet act of love that had been taken for granted. I added today's confirmations to the stack. The next call came from Dad. I didn't answer, but the voicemail came through seconds later. His voice was tense, controlled. "Emily, I don't know what you're doing, but this isn't funny. The company's payments aren't processing, and the power bill was rejected. Call me back immediately." I listened to the message twice, then deleted it. That night, I sat by the window watching the lights of downtown flicker through the fog. Somewhere out there, my family was sitting in confusion, finally feeling the weight I'd carried for years. I wasn't cruel enough to enjoy it, but I couldn't deny the satisfaction of knowing they were finally experiencing consequence. For so long, they had dismissed my value because it wasn't loud or visible. They saw generosity as duty, responsibility as weakness. But they were learning now, quiet doesn't mean powerless. Silence can be a scalpel. At midnight, I checked my email one last time. Dozens of messages waited: account ownership confirmation, payment authorization removed, subscription canceled. Each subject line was like a heartbeat, proof of freedom. I shut the laptop and turned off the lights. The room went dark except for the faint city glow filtering through the blinds. I lay on the couch listening to the hum of the refrigerator, the steady rhythm of my own breathing. For the first time in years, my life wasn't tied to theirs by money, guilt, or obligation. Every connection had been cut. The next morning, my phone lit up before sunrise. A new wave of messages appeared. Rachel, Mom's freaking out. "Dad says you sabotaged the company. Mom, please answer. Your father is furious. We can't pay the staff. This isn't you, Emily. You're better than this. Dad, if you don't fix this today, we'll lose everything. I don't know what's gotten into you." I set the phone down and poured coffee. The messages kept coming, filling the screen like static, but their urgency no longer reached me. I stood by the window watching the world outside wake up: trucks on the street, children walking to school, strangers starting their day without me. I realized something then. For years, I'd mistaken being needed for being loved. Now I finally knew the difference. I took another sip of coffee, letting the warmth settle in my chest. My phone buzzed again, then stopped. The silence that followed was soft, almost musical. They would rage. They would blame me. They would call me selfish, heartless, cruel. But eventually they'd understand. I hadn't broken anything. I'd simply stopped repairing what was already broken. And for once that choice didn't make me the villain. It made me free. By Monday night, the systems were no longer mine, every thread cut clean. And as I shut my laptop, I knew the real storm would begin the moment they tried to turn their world back on. The panic began before sunrise on Tuesday. I knew it the moment my phone lit up with a string of missed calls: Dad, Mom, Rachel, then Dad again. The vibration on the nightstand sounded almost frantic, like the device itself was shivering. I didn't answer. I let it buzz until the battery icon turned red. When I finally opened my laptop, the emails were already piling up. Urgent system access denied. Billing failure notice. Vendor contracts suspended. Each subject line read like a confession. They were drowning, and they didn't even know how deep it went yet. Downstairs, the city was waking up. Car horns, distant sirens, the steady rhythm of early commuters. I sat in the quiet glow of my screen, watching the digital unraveling I'd set in motion. I had spent years keeping everything alive for them. Now I was watching it die in real time. Around 8 o'clock, my phone started ringing again. I muted it, but the messages kept coming. Rachel first, her tone sharp even in text. "What the hell did you do? I can't log into payroll." "Dad says you changed the credentials." Then Dad, "Emily, this is serious. The bank called about frozen transfers. Call me immediately." And finally, "Mom, please, sweetheart. Your father is so stressed. He hasn't eaten. Don't do this to us." I turned the phone face down on the table and poured myself another cup of coffee. Their panic was predictable. Their guilt was not. The guilt they tried to hand back to me through every voicemail and text, like it was a family heirloom they refused to keep. By mid-morning, I opened the Carter Systems monitoring dashboard just to see the damage. The numbers were all red: payment failures, unprocessed invoices, blocked user access. I had written the architecture myself, so I knew exactly what would happen once I stepped back. They had built their empire on my stability, and stability doesn't survive without support. I scrolled through the system logs, my fingers tracing the timeline of their collapse. Each notification, each red flag was a monument to my absence. Across town, I could almost picture them in the conference room, Dad pacing Rachel, snapping at the IT team, Mom calling everyone she knew who might fix it. I smiled faintly. For once, I wasn't the one scrambling. By noon, the first voicemail arrived from Dad. His voice was tight, professional, the kind he used with investors. "Emily, I don't know what's happening, but we can't get into our systems. Your mother is upset. Just call me, please. Let's talk about this like adults." Adults. The irony almost made me laugh. When they were belittling me, they were parents. When they needed me suddenly, we were equals. An hour later came another message, this time from Rachel. "Okay, fine. You made your point. We get it. You're angry. But you're hurting everyone, not just us. The employees can't get paid. You think this makes you look strong. It makes you look insane." I deleted it without listening to the rest. The word insane didn't sting anymore. It was just another tool she used when she couldn't manipulate me. Outside, the sky turned dark, early clouds pressing low over the city. I spent the afternoon cleaning, folding laundry, wiping down counters, anything to keep my hands busy. My phone kept lighting up in the corner, a little beacon of their chaos. I ignored it. The silence between me and them wasn't cruel. It was clarity. When evening came, I sat on the couch, the binder in my lap. I opened to the section labeled Company and read through the records. Every transfer, every emergency payment I had made to keep their business afloat. I had been their invisible investor, their unpaid accountant, their personal safety net. They'd laughed about leaving me out of Thanksgiving. Now their entire operation depended on the person they'd cast out. Around 6, a knock came at my door. 3 short raps. My stomach tightened. For a second, I thought it might be them. I looked through the peephole. It was the building manager. "Miss Carter," he said politely when I opened the door. "There's a man downstairs who says he's your father. He's been waiting in the lobby for almost an hour." I nodded slowly. "Thank you, Mike. Tell him I'm not available." He hesitated. "He looks pretty upset." "I'm sure he does." When the door closed, I leaned against it, exhaling. I pictured Dad sitting there in the lobby, checking his phone every few minutes, wondering how his obedient daughter had turned into someone he couldn't control. By 8, I received another voicemail from him. His voice had lost the business tone. It was softer, almost pleading. "Emily, honey, please. Your mother's crying. Rachel's panicking. We're trying to understand what's going on. Just talk to me." For a moment, my throat tightened. Not out of guilt, but out of recognition. This was the first time he had ever asked to understand me, not to correct me. Still, I didn't call back. Not yet. Instead, I opened my laptop again. I checked each system one more time, verifying that every account had been transferred properly. Then, one by one, I logged out of each portal company, utilities, taxes, payroll. Each logout felt like closing a door I'd been trapped behind for years. The emails kept coming. "Emily, please answer. You're ruining us. We need you." They weren't wrong. They did need me. But they would have to learn what it meant to need someone who no longer volunteered to be used. I shut the laptop and stood up. The apartment was quiet, except for the rain starting again against the windows. The city lights blurred through the water, glowing gold and white. I poured myself a drink and sat on the floor, watching the drops trace crooked paths down the glass. In the background, my phone buzzed again. The screen lit up with Mom's name. I didn't pick up. The call went to voicemail, and a few seconds later, her voice came through, trembling. "Emily, your father can't sleep. He says his chest hurts. He's so worried. Please, please stop this before something terrible happens." The manipulation was familiar, but it still hit its mark for a second. I pressed my hand to my chest, breathing through the weight of it. Then I remembered all the other times she'd used that same line, every time I'd said no, every time she wanted to make me feel like saying yes was a matter of survival. Not this time. The phone buzzed again. Rachel this time. Her voice was raw. "I can't believe you. You think this is strength. It's cruelty. You're killing Dad with stress. If something happens to him, it'll be on you." I turned off the phone entirely and let the room fall into darkness. Hours later, I woke to silence. No buzzing, no notification.